I'm Martin McMillan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pollen. We provide app and game developers an alternative financing model, which is provide around unlocking the money that's already been made on the App Store. Rather than wait up to 60 plus days to get paid, we allow developers to recycle that money directly back into user acquisition. I'd like to introduce Oliver Kern, which I'm sure many of you will know already. Oliver's had a great amount of experience working with app and game developers in both kind of launch and scaling strategies. So we were asked to come along and talk through some of Oliver's experiences and some of the challenges and so on. Ollie, anything you wanted to add about maybe some of the work you've done, who you've worked with, to give people some context?
Yeah, so I've worked for the last 4 years, and that's already an age in mobile, I think, for all sorts of small and bigger companies. So sometimes very small indie almost teams of game developers, like Another Place production, a studio here in London, to some bigger ones like Hutch Games, also based here in London, Mind Candy, Rovio, a lot of smaller and bigger companies, I would say, that have different demand and different questions around marketing and user acquisition.
Cool. And in terms of what you've seen, sort of current trends, if you like, over the last maybe 3 to 6 months, or obviously it's a fast-moving space. Anything you can kind of sum up in a few points about some of the most recent changes?
I think there have been quite a few changes. One interesting change, because I'm a big fan of Facebook, I must say, because especially for games, it works extremely well. They introduced, beginning of the year, the relevance score, and that actually has quite a big impact, but it's also a good, I think, measurement tool for your creatives and the way how you target. That basically made it, for some companies, certainly much more challenging to kind of get the volumes of installs that they used to get. I think, other than that, I mean, it's all over the news. I mean, video ad networks are growing and growing and growing. I think one of the biggest challenges in games specifically is that games are, on average at least, very low LTV products. And that makes it even more challenging to kind of get user acquisition and advertising to work, with prices going up and up and up, and that's not going to change, that's for sure. It becomes more and more challenging for any game developer that is trying to really get some scale in mobile.
So one of the things I think there's pretty established logic in the marketplace about how to go about a launch in terms of lots of good advice from conferences like this, and sort of almost like a best practice emerging around soft launching in a particular country, measuring everything before you're thinking about doubling down. So what advice would you have for any developers who have perhaps figured out a soft launch formula and metrics that everything seems to be working, so that they're getting a positive return in terms of LTV over their acquisition costs? I mean, how does it work? Do things, if you've got a trial working in New Zealand, can you just, hit the gas? Does it just scale linearly? Or what can some of the scaling's gotchas be from, even if you've got the formula working in the short term?
I think, so in the short term, your app is new, right? So there is always a much higher chance to kind of come in front of a relatively virgin audience, and it's always easier. It gets really challenging once your app is like half a year old or a year old, to then still get at scale users. The other big challenge, I would say, is that every country is also different, and the operating system is also different. So you have to, I think that was mentioned earlier as well, you have to know the lifetime value of your users in a country per operating system, that at least, to understand what you're doing and not flying blind. And if you do something in New Zealand, a very small market, it doesn't mean that it's going to go as good in Australia even, or in the US or in Spain. So there are completely different rule sets, also depending certainly on when it comes to games, on the appetite for a certain genre, on localization, all these kind of things.
And any tips around? I know when we've spoken in the past, you've been very, very hot on.
Can't believe it! 15 minutes and I get a call.
On the idea of acquiring users efficiently. So there are so many options out there. Any sort of efficiency tips in terms of where to go, how to look, maybe which other networks, or if there's anything around the fringes?
So I mean, there are probably around 800 networks out there that all trumpet loud that they are world-class, leading, whatever. On the other hand, it's also very, very clear that the majority of traffic lies with only a small number of companies. So my take is, if you can get it to work on let's say Facebook for games, Chart Boost, with some of the leading video ad networks, with Google, with Twitter, then you're kind of already covered. I mean, that's where your scale, if you want to scale user acquisition and can afford it, that's where your scale is going to be. It's not going to be necessarily with a very boutique ad network that may have, some publisher that they own that can deliver another 30 or 50 installs per day. What's the point?
And so, what happens if there's a lot of talk about CPIs rising and rising? Let's say you've got an app or a games company, and they know they've got an LTV at a certain level, and there was some decent fat or some decent margin in terms of their LTV over the CPA. The acquisition costs are just going up and up and up, and then the amount they're able to spend on some of those networks is going down, which is just demand economics. Is there anything around the fringes? I mean, for example, people looking to TV and other sorts of things that you've seen people do effectively? There's a lot more talk about TV now than there was, for example, even 12 months ago.
I think TV is certainly an option if you have the right partner. You need to be smart about it. It needs to be, if you're performance driven, it needs to be somebody as a TV partner that has also real experience in direct response TV format, and how to program that and these kind of things. You can't go to just any media agency that does a lot of brand spending. That's never ever going to work. Yes, you're going to go get Super Bowl maybe, or some prime time whatever, but it's not going to perform. So you have to work with the right partner there. There was something on your question I also wanted to answer on.
Stuff around the fringes.
Oh yeah, I think, well, the most important thing, I think Becky also mentioned that to quite a large degree, it is about targeting and creative. So you can still today buy thousands and thousands of installs per day for under $1 if you have really, really good creative and you're really, really smart with targeting. That's what really makes the difference. It's not using a spreadsheet and 500 different creatives that are all more or less the same and trying to find the best out of the average. It is about marketing beyond the spreadsheet and being creative beyond the spreadsheet, and that's where I think, at least in games, I think a lot of people are missing out. Because, I mean, games is entertainment that should be possible to find and create some real recognizable campaigns.
So what about some of the growth pains and growing challenges? So let's say let's say you have an app studio or a game studio, and they're launching something new, and they get a huge amount of traction because they're lucky enough to get featured in the early days. So you go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. Maybe they haven't thought through all of their UA strategy. How are they going to best capitalize on that feature?
Yeah, it's extremely challenging. I mean, there are many aspects to it. You basically have an LTV model. It's a model, so that doesn't mean that that this is all exactly going to happen. You know, it could already next week look completely different because some great company launched a very competitive product, and then suddenly you're not getting the organic traffic that you used to get, etc. So there is a lot of danger in just running after it. You have to. I mean, I would think you always have to be a little bit conservative and not just burn through all your money, because user acquisition at least is really quite expensive. And then suddenly figure out, oh, yeah, no, it didn't really work.
Yeah, talk to any VC who funds games and apps companies. There's a lot of money being burnt into user acquisition before LTVs were properly known. So.
Yeah, it's a shame, right? Because VC money should go into creating value and not necessarily only into advertising. But, yeah.
It's a bit like all the venture funding that went into music businesses. It all went into upfronts before actually the models were really known. That's why music industry really suffered from venture money being spent efficiently. In terms of when is the right time? You know, you see, in terms of the growth pains and challenges, very often we talk to industry and say, I'm going to hire a UA person, and that's going to be the answer to all their user acquisition problems as some kind of silver bullet. A, do you think that is some kind of silver bullet? B, is there an optimal time? How are the companies that you sort of work with and the experiences you see in the marketplace, how does that panning out?
So, I mean, I work with a small team as either kind of the extended marketing team or the entire marketing team, depending on how big the game developer is. It's extremely challenging. It's extremely challenging to find good people. I mean, whoever is looking for a job, I think these jobs are highly paid and will be in high demand for the time to come. The big challenge for many companies that I see is to actually assess the skill set, because it is, in my mind, it is not only the skill of an accountant who can kind of look at Excel, which is a very, very important part, but it also needs, at least from my experience, that level of creativity, the spirit to use data and create and make use of the data that you have to tackle challenges in your creatives, in your product, etc. So to be quite holistic in the approach. So actually, what marketing people used to be long time ago.
It's a good combination of left brain and right brain.
Yeah, I think so. It's hard to find these people. And a game developer who loves developing games, they may take weeks to hire the right game designer or level designer whatsoever, and they may have a lunch with somebody, and yeah, he was just nice and sweet talker, and they hire him for a marketing position. I'm not sure that that's smart.
Cool, great. So I think that was all the kind of questions I had. So I want to go through with you. Thanks a lot for coming on and sharing some of your experiences.
Pleasure. Thank you.